Have you ever killed someone who wasn't the enemy? Something that lives inside your head, whispering in the quiet hours, no matter how hard you try to forget? The shot still echoes in my mind. Every night, every time I close my eyes, I see his face. I remember the weight of the rifle, the trembling of my hands, the dust rising from the ground as I pulled the trigger. It was supposed to be another enemy, another faceless shadow in the chaos of war. But that day, it wasn't. The bullet left the barrel before my brain could even ask who. And when the echo faded, I realized the sound that followed wasn't victory. It was the end of something far deeper. War teaches you to stop asking questions. It numbs your senses, replaces doubt with instinct. You see movement, you shoot, you hesitate, you die. That's what they told us again and again until it became truth. But what happens when instinct betrays you? When the thing that's supposed to keep you alive turns you into something else? Something you swore you'd never become? I still remember the silence after the shot. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that screams. The kind that fills every space around you until you can't breathe. His body hit the ground slowly, like the world was forcing me to watch every second of it. And then, when I saw his face, when I saw the insignia on his uniform, everything inside me froze. He wasn't the enemy. He was one of us. I can still feel the dirt on my knees when I ran to him, the way my fingers slipped on his blood as I tried to hold on, as if I could somehow pull the bullet back, undo it all. But time doesn't bend for regret. It just watches as you fall apart. You ever felt that? The weight of something you can't confess? Stay with me till the end, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about war. It's about guilt, about what happens when the battle ends. But the real war, the one inside your chest, refuses to stop. The man I shot wasn't the enemy, and yet somehow I've been fighting him ever since. This is where it begins. Sometimes when I talk about that day, people ask me why I still carry it, why I don't just move on. But how do you move on from something that carved its name into your soul? It's not just a memory, it's a wound that breathes. And every time I tell this story, a part of me hopes that maybe someone out there will understand what it means to live with a mistake you can't undo. If this feels familiar, if you've ever carried guilt, regret, or something you wish you could take back, tell me in the comments. I mean it. Words can be heavy, but sometimes when we share them, they lose just a little of their weight. Maybe your story can help someone else breathe again. And if this story touches you in some way, if it makes you think or feel something you can't quite explain, leave a like. It's a small gesture, but it tells me this kind of story matters. It helps this channel reach more people who need to hear that they're not alone in their silence. If you want to walk with me through more stories like this, stories that speak to the parts of us we try to hide, subscribe. This space was made for that, for real voices, real pain, and the quiet truths we rarely say out loud. Your presence here keeps these memories alive, turns them from whispers into echoes that reach beyond the screen. So, stay close, because what comes next, it's where the real confession begins. The desert was alive that morning, but not in the way nature intends. It breathed smoke instead of air, and the wind carried the taste of metal, burnt gunpowder and dust clinging to every breath. The sun rose, slow, cruel, spilling light over ruins that had no names anymore. I remember thinking how war changes color. Nothing stays green or blue for long. Everything turns gray. Walls, skies, faces, even the soul. I was just a man in a uniform that didn't feel like mine anymore. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from exhaustion, from the endless weight of being alert, ready to kill or die at the sound of a radio crackle. The radio was our lifeline and our curse, whispering orders that sounded more like prayers. Somewhere, someone shouted coordinates. Somewhere else, someone screamed a name that would never get an answer. And in between it all, I was just trying to hold on to the idea that I still knew who I was. They told us war would make us stronger, that it would forge discipline, courage, brotherhood. But they never spoke about what it takes from you, how it steals the small, quiet parts of humanity, until you can't tell the difference between doing your duty and losing yourself. Each step I took that day felt heavier, not because of the gear on my back, but because of the thoughts I was trying to bury beneath it. There's something about the battlefield that rewires your mind. You stop thinking in right and wrong. It's just survive or don't. And yet, in those rare seconds of calm, when the noise fades and you can hear your own heartbeat, that's when the truth hits you. The truth that every decision, every pull of the trigger, carries a life attached to it. We were told to see the enemy as targets, silhouettes on the horizon. But what they don't prepare you for is when one of those silhouettes turns out to be someone like you, someone's son, someone's friend, someone who laughed and dreamed before all this. Now I want to go even deeper into that thought, because this isn't just about a mistake on the battlefield. It's about the transformation that happens inside a person when he realizes the line between good and evil isn't out there, it's within. In war, you start to understand that the real enemy doesn't always wear another uniform. Sometimes it's the voice inside your head, the one that asks if you'll ever be the same again. If any part of this echoes something in you, write the word truth in the comments, because sometimes acknowledging the truth, even silently, is where the healing begins. It started with a sound, small, distant, almost insignificant, a rustle beyond the broken wall like fabric brushing against stone. I remember the sky that day was colorless, the air heavy with a tension that pressed against your chest. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of gunfire somewhere far off. Irregular, desperate. I could hear the radio crackling in my ear, voices overlapping. Too fast, too panicked to understand. Orders, warnings, maybe even names. But when everything sounds like chaos, every word becomes noise. I scanned the horizon, my rifle raised, every nerve in my body screaming for clarity. But there was none. Only dust, only the echo of footsteps I couldn't place, ours or theirs. That's the thing about battle. It blurs the lines, turns direction into confusion, sound into fear. My eyes caught movement, just a flicker, behind a collapsed building. My breath froze. Training took over before thought had a chance to argue. In war, hesitation kills, so I didn't hesitate. The shot broke through the silence like lightning through glass. One moment of noise, then the world went still again. The recoil pushed against my shoulder, and for a second, I felt relief. That strange, twisted relief of surviving one more second. But as the dust settled and the shape on the ground became clearer, the relief twisted into something else, something I didn't have a name for yet. I stepped closer, my boots crunching over. Debris. The radio in my ear was still buzzing, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was the ringing in my head, sharp, endless, like punishment. My hands trembled as I lowered the weapon, the metallic taste of adrenaline thick on my tongue. I told myself it was over, that I'd done what I was supposed to do. But then, I saw the patch on the sleeve. It wasn't red, it wasn't the enemy, it was one of ours. The air left my lungs all at once. My knees gave out before the guilt even reached me. The silence around me grew heavier, pressing down like the weight of the world itself. My mind tried to make sense of it, to find logic in something that had none. Maybe he was in the wrong place. Maybe I was. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I had pulled the trigger too fast. I had trusted fear more than I trusted my own eyes. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what happened next wasn't just about the shot or the mistake. It was about the moment reality, cracked open and showed me the truth hidden beneath every act of war. The truth that sometimes the real battle begins only after the gun goes silent. If you're still here with me, write the word echo in the comments, because that's what mistakes like this leave behind. Not just memories, echoes that never stop. The sound of the gunshot wasn't just noise, it was finality. It tore through the air, sharp and merciless, like the sky itself had cracked open. The recoil hit my shoulder, my breath caught halfway, and for a moment, time didn't move. The echo rolled across the ruins, bouncing between shattered walls, fading into an uneasy stillness. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that isn't absence, but weight, pressing, suffocating, alive. I could still smell the gunpowder, feel the metal of the rifle burning against my palms. My eyes tried to focus through the haze of dust and smoke. There was movement on the ground, slow, fragile, a body. My body tensed, instinctively ready to fire again, but something inside me hesitated. The figure didn't reach for a weapon. He clutched his chest instead, like he was holding on to the last breath he had left. I took a step forward, and everything around me went quiet. No radio, no voices, just the sound of my boots crunching against debris. The world had narrowed down to one thing, the shape of the man I'd just shot. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was fine, that I had done what I was trained to do, that this was war. But then I saw the color. His badge wasn't red. It was blue, just like mine. My vision blurred. My knees hit the ground before I even realized I'd fallen. I crawled toward him, each inch heavier than the last. His eyes were open, wide, not with anger but confusion, as if he too was trying to understand how this had happened. His lips trembled. He tried to speak, but all I could hear was the gurgle of air escaping his lungs. I pressed my hands over the wound, uselessly, desperately whispering words I didn't even recognize. "Hold on, please, hold on." The blood was warm, almost comforting, until I realized it was covering my hands. I kept pressing harder, as if force alone could undo what I'd done. But it was too late. His gaze began to fade, drifting away like smoke into the wind. And when it was over, when there was no breath left, no heartbeat to cling to, the silence returned. Only this time, it wasn't around me. It was inside me. That's the moment everything changed. Not just the way I saw war, but the way I saw myself. I thought the battlefield was about enemies and allies, victory and defeat. But that day I learned something else, that the real cost of survival is the part of you that doesn't survive with it. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what happened after that shot wasn't just about loss, it was about revelation. The truth that sometimes the greatest enemy we face is the version of ourselves we create to justify the unforgivable. If this part of the story hits you somewhere deep, write the word silence in the comments, because in the end, that's what remains after every shot. Silence, and everything it hides. I wanted to scream, but the only sound I heard was the ringing in my ears. It was sharp, endless, crawling into my skull like a punishment I couldn't escape. My breath came in short bursts, each one louder than the last, until I realized it wasn't breathing. It was panic. My hands were shaking, covered in blood that didn't belong to me. I kept pressing down on the wound, whispering nonsense, words that meant nothing but felt like the only thing I could still offer him. His eyes were still open, staring at something behind me, or maybe through me. I wanted him to blink, to move, to do anything that would prove there was still time. But the stillness was absolute. Every second stretched like hours. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my head, heavy, desperate, as if trying to fill the silence his had left behind. The radio on my shoulder crackled again, voices asking for updates, demanding positions. I couldn't answer. My throat was locked. The world around me moved on. The battle raged somewhere beyond the ruins. But in that moment, everything for me had stopped. The dust, the smoke, the heat, they all faded into the background. It was just me, the man I shot, and the unbearable truth between us. Fear crept in next. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that freezes you. I thought about the others finding out, the reports, the consequences, the shame. My mind raced through excuses, trying to build a wall between me and what I had done. But every lie I imagined collapsed before it could even take form, because there's no defense against guilt when it's carved into your own hands. I looked around, trying to orient myself, but the landscape had changed. Not physically, it was still the same rubble and ruin, but something inside me had shifted. The air felt thinner, the ground heavier. I felt like I was trapped inside a photograph, doomed to relive that same moment over and over. I remember touching his shoulder one last time, hoping he'd move, hoping it wasn't real, but his skin was already cooling. That's when I knew the truth had taken root, and it would grow inside me for the rest of my life. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because panic doesn't end when the moment does. It becomes part of you. It hides behind your thoughts, shaping your decisions, changing your entire mental landscape. It turns you into someone you don't recognize, someone who keeps pretending everything's fine while carrying a truth too heavy to speak. If you've ever felt that kind of silence after a mistake, that invisible weight pressing against your chest, write the word truth in the comments, because sometimes the hardest part of confession isn't saying what happened, it's accepting that it was you. I kept fighting, but that day, something in me stopped fighting back. It wasn't visible to anyone else, not to my unit, not to my commander, not even to the mirror when I forced myself to stare into it. But inside I knew. There was a fracture, a quiet collapse. Every shot I fired after that felt heavier, every breath harder to justify. I moved through the battlefield like a shadow of who I'd been, trying to convince myself that I was still a soldier, that I still belonged there. The days that followed blurred together, Just noise and orders and smoke. I remember the moment they asked me what happened in that sector. My voice didn't tremble. My story came out clean, rehearsed, believable. That's what fear does. It sharpens the edges of your lies. I said I'd seen movement, that I'd followed protocol. They nodded, wrote it down, and moved on. Nobody questioned me. That's the curse of war. It gives you permission to hide behind chaos. But even as the world believed my version, my mind didn't. At night, when the noise died down, I could still hear the shot, see his eyes. I tried to rationalize it, told myself that mistakes happen, that it could have been anyone, yet no amount of logic could drown the truth. It wasn't a mistake of circumstance, it was a moment of weakness. A decision born from fear, from exhaustion, from the kind of mental fog that war plants inside you. I started talking less, eating less. My comrades thought I was just tired, worn out from the missions, but inside, I was unraveling. I avoided the places that reminded me of him, the stretch of ground where it happened, the smell of smoke after a firefight. Still, the memories followed me, in the smell of my uniform, in the sound of the trigger clicking into place, in every quiet second before dawn. I became good at pretending. That's another kind of survival, acting as if the damage isn't there. But guilt has a way of finding you, even in the smallest gestures. It hides behind your laughter, your movements, your silence, and sometimes it looks back at you through the eyes of the people who trust you most. I'd hear someone joke about friendly fire, and my stomach would twist. They didn't know the truth behind the joke. I did. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because the aftermath of a mistake like that doesn't end when the war does. It follows you home, reshapes your mentality, your sense of identity. It becomes a shadow stitched to your soul, a silent witness to the version of yourself that never made it out of that battlefield. If you've ever carried something invisible, something no one else can see but that changes everything inside you, write the word shadow in the comments, because that's what guilt becomes. Not a memory, but a shadow that never leaves. I've carried this name in silence for years. He deserved better, and I deserve the truth. Sometimes I wonder if I started recording this confession for forgiveness, or if it's simply because silence has become too heavy to bear. The war ended long ago, but for me it never really did. The battlefield moved, from the dirt and ruins of a foreign land to the quiet corners of my own mind. It's strange how the world expects you to return home the same person who left. They greet you with medals, with smiles, with questions you don't know how to answer. They ask what it was like, but the truth is, there are no words for what it's like to take a life that wasn't meant to be taken. I remember sitting alone after the service, the noise of celebration still echoing outside, staring at the reflection of a man I didn't recognize. My uniform was clean, pressed, decorated, but it felt like a lie stitched into fabric. People called me a hero, and every time they did, it cut a little deeper, because I knew that somewhere a family was missing their son because of me. Somewhere a mother cried into an empty chair, and she would never know my name. I tried to bury it, to keep moving, to fill the silence with routine, work, marriage, life. But guilt has a way of surviving every attempt to kill it. It follows you like a shadow that never tires. You can change cities, faces, even names, but you can't run from the truth that lives behind your own eyes. And sometimes, when the world gets quiet enough, you can still hear it, the ringing, the echo of that single shot, reminding you that time doesn't forgive what conscience remembers. I found his name years later, printed on a forgotten list of casualties. Seeing it there made everything real again. His name, his age, the date, the unit, the same uniform, the same flag. I stared at that paper for what felt like hours. The guilt didn't fade, but something shifted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to acknowledge him, to say his name out loud, because silence had turned into a prison, and confession, this confession, is the only way out. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because this isn't just about guilt anymore. It's about transformation, about the human need to face our hidden truths before they consume us completely. I've learned that confession isn't weakness, it's the beginning of understanding. The real strength lies in tearing down the walls we build to protect ourselves from our own regrets. If you're still listening, write the word forgive in the comments. Not for me, but for yourself. Because forgiveness, in the end, is the only thing strong enough to turn silence into peace. War doesn't end when the guns go quiet. It lives inside you. It lingers in the way you see people, in the way you react to sudden noises, in the way you wake up at night searching for something that isn't there anymore. The battlefield fades from sight, but it doesn't leave your body. It becomes part of your wiring. You start to see the world differently, as if the colors have all been replaced by shades of memory and regret. Every laugh sounds fragile. Every silence feels too long. It's as if the mind can't fully return to peace because it's learned to survive in chaos. There were nights when I dreamed of him. Not the war, not the firefights, not even the blood. Just him, standing in that place, eyes clear, almost peaceful. I'd wake up with my heart racing, unsure if it was guilt or relief that he still existed somewhere inside my mind. Guilt has a strange way of binding you to the ones you've hurt. It turns pain into a language you both share, even when one of you is gone. I stopped believing in heroes a long time ago. I stopped believing in victory too. What I learned instead was humanity, raw, imperfect, fragile. I learned that every decision carries weight, even the ones made in a heartbeat, that behind every uniform, there's a story, a family, a soul. War strips you of names and faces, but when the dust settles, what remains isn't the mission, it's the faces you can't forget. For years I thought punishment was something external, something handed down by others. But the real punishment was the one I gave myself. The way I replayed that moment over and over, searching for a different outcome, I used to wonder what would have happened if I'd waited one more second. 1 second. That's all it would have taken to see the truth, to save a life, to keep my own humanity intact. But war doesn't give you time. It trains you to act before you think, and then it leaves you to live with the consequences of that reflex. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding guilt isn't enough. You have to understand what it reveals, the truth about what we value, what we fear, and what we become when everything we believe in falls apart. Sometimes it takes losing your faith to rediscover compassion. Sometimes it takes a mistake to understand the meaning of forgiveness. That's the paradox of humanity, that our greatest transformations often come from the places we wish never existed. If these words resonate with something inside you, write humanity in the comments, because maybe that's what redemption really is. Not erasing the past, but learning to see the human within it. Maybe this confession won't bring him back, but at least now he's not forgotten. For years I carried his memory like a wound that refused to close. I avoided everything that reminded me of him. The sound of boots on gravel, the faint smell of oil and dust, even the silence after a storm. But the truth has a strange way of finding you when you least expect it. One day I woke up and realized that running from the past was another form of cowardice. I had faced bullets, explosions, chaos, yet I was terrified of facing a single name written on a grave. So I went. No uniform, no medals, no rehearsed words. Just me, older, slower, stripped of the pride I once mistook for strength. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I found his name carved into stone, faint but still there, surviving time the way memories do. I stood there for a long time, not knowing what to say. What can you say to someone whose life you took away? Sorry isn't enough. Silence isn't enough either. So I spoke anyway. I told him everything I never had the courage to say, that it wasn't hate, it wasn't anger, it was fear. It was the fog of a war that turned us all into ghosts before we ever died. I left a flower, not because I thought it would change anything, but because I needed to leave a part of me there, the part that couldn't carry the weight anymore. As I turned to walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, not forgiveness, but release. It was as if for the first time, the silence between us wasn't punishment, but understanding. I realized that maybe redemption isn't about erasing what you did. It's about acknowledging it, giving it a name, allowing the pain to breathe instead of burying it deeper. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because redemption isn't a destination, it's a process. It's a slow transformation that starts the moment you stop lying to yourself. We spend so much of our lives trying to hide the things we regret, when in reality, those are the very things that hold the key to who we truly are. The truth doesn't destroy you, it humbles you. It strips away the illusions until all that's left is what's real. And in that raw, vulnerable place, healing finally begins. If these words resonate with you, write "Forgiveness begins" in the comments, because sometimes the smallest act of honesty, even whispered to the wind, can be the start of a redemption that no one else will ever see, but that changes everything within. There's a strange peace that comes when you finally stop running from your own story. It doesn't erase the pain, it doesn't make the memories fade, but it softens them like waves that no longer crash, only whisper against the shore. I used to think confession was about weakness, about surrender. Now I know it's the opposite. It's about courage, the courage to face the truth, even when it breaks you, because only when you break can the light find a way in. Every word I've spoken here carries a piece of the man I once was, the soldier, the coward, the survivor. But this confession, it belongs to something greater than me. It's a reminder that even the darkest mistakes can become part of someone else's healing. Maybe someone listening tonight has been carrying their own silence, their own hidden wound. If my story reaches them, even one of them, then the pain wasn't for nothing. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because what remains after the noise, after the regret, after all the battles, is something profoundly human, the desire to be understood. That's all we really want, isn't it? To know that our pain has meaning, that our existence, with all its flaws and fractures, left some trace of truth behind. If these words spoke to something inside you, write "I understand" in the comments. Not for me, but for yourself, as a way to remind your own heart that even in the aftermath of guilt there can still be grace. If you've made it this far, thank you. It means something, more than you probably realize, not just to me, but to the story itself, because every time someone listens all the way through, this confession finds a heartbeat again. If this journey spoke to you, if it stirred something quiet inside, let me know you were here. Write, "I was here until the end," in the comments. I read every word, and each one reminds me that these stories still matter. And if you felt a connection tonight, if this kind of truth, raw and human, is something you'd like to keep exploring, subscribe. That's how we keep this space alive, how these voices, even the broken ones, continue to be heard. Leave a like too. It's a small gesture, but it helps these stories reach others who might need to hear them just as much as you did. There's another video right here that continues this reflection, a piece that ties into everything we've talked about. Click and come with me for a few more minutes. Maybe the next story won't just make you think, maybe it'll make you feel something you didn't expect.